Hello, this is Mrs. Ward, and I am going to go over the classwork for section 4.2, this part 2, part B, on the unit circle. So we're going to start with number 2. I'm going to give you an ordered pair that represents the point on that circle, and that's 12/13 and 5/13. And I want you to find the exact value of the 6 trig functions. So we're doing all 6 this time. So I'm going to start with knowing that my sine is my y value. So remember it goes cosine, sine. So to find the sine of theta, I'm going to do my y value, which in this case is 5/13. My cosine of theta is going to be my x value, which is 12/13. My tangent of theta is going to be my y, which is 5/13, over my x, which is 12/13. And to simplify that, I'm going to take 5/13, multiplying by the reciprocal. I'm going to have 13 over 12, and that'll simplify the 5/12. Then I'm going to find the reciprocal. So I'm going to change colors to do that, and I'm just going to put them underneath. So the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So the cosecant of theta is going to be 13 over 5. The reciprocal of cosine is secant. So the secant of theta is going to be 13 over 12. And the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. And that's going to be 12 over 5. So all I do to find the reciprocal functions is just take the original answer and flip it. So now I have this second one, number 4, which is my ordered pair is -4/5, -3/5. So when I go to do my first trig functions, my sine of theta is going to be a -3/5. My cosine of theta is going to be a -4/5. That's my y and that's my x. And my tangent is going to be the y, which is -3/5, over the x, which is -4/5. To simplify that, I would take -3/5 times the reciprocal 5 over -4, and I end up with a negative divided by a negative, which makes it positive, so my tangent is a positive 3/4. To find my reciprocals, the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, and that's going to be -5 over 3. The reciprocal of cosine is secant, that's going to be -5 over 4, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent, and that's going to be a positive 4/3. So that's how I do the 6 trig functions when I'm given a specific ordered pair. Okay, the next one, it says evaluate the sine, cosine, tangent. This is a throwback from the last section. I changed it to 29, so we're doing 29, which is the 6 trig functions of -3 pi over 2. Remember, I don't like it when it's negative, so I'm going to take that -3 pi over 2, and I'm going to add a positive 2 pi, so I can put it on my unit circle. And when I do that, I end up with a positive pi over 2. So my angle is still -3 pi over 2, but pi over 2 is a coterminal angle, so it ends at the same place. So this is the ordered pair that I'm dealing with. So to find the sine of -3 pi over 2 is going to be the y value, which is 1. The cosine of -3 pi over 2 is going to be the x value, which is 0. The tangent of -3 pi over 2 is going to be my y, which is 1, over my x, which is 0. So this is going to be undefined. And I think it just wanted the 3. Yes, it just wanted the sine, cosine, and tangent. So I am done with that question with those 3 answers. Going on to the next one, it says evaluate, if possible, the 6 trig functions. So now I have -2 pi over 3, so I'm going to take -2 pi over 3, putting it on my unit circle, I'm going to add 2 pi. When I do that, I get 4 pi over 3. So to find the cosine first, the sine of -2 pi over 3, I'm finding the sine of -2 pi over 3, but in order to do that, I am going to look on my unit circle at the coterminal angle, which is 4 pi over 3. So I am looking at this ordered pair right here for this particular problem. It's the same, it's a coterminal angle, so it has the same value. So when I do that, my sine is going to be the y value, which is negative 3 square root of 3 over 2. My cosine, and I guess you could be looking at your trig chart too, always an option. So negative 2 pi over 3, which is going to be a negative 1/2. And my tangent of negative 2 pi over 3 is going to be my y, which is negative square root of 3 over 2, over my x, which is negative 1/2. I have a negative divided by a negative, which will make it positive. Negative square root of 3 over 2 times the reciprocal, and I end up with a positive square root of 3. Now to find the reciprocals, I'm just going to go up here, and the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So the cosecant of negative 2 pi over 3 is going to be the reciprocal of that, which is 2 over a negative square root of 3. Don't like the fact that I have that radical in the denominator, so I'm going to rationalize by multiplying by the square root of 3 over 3. And when I do that, I end up with a negative 2 square roots of 3 all over the number 3. To find the reciprocal of cosine, that's secant, I'm going to take the reciprocal of 1/2. So I'm going to take negative 1/2. I'm just going to flip it, which will be negative 2 over 1, which I'm probably just going to write as negative 2. And finally, the reciprocal of tangent will be for the cotangent. This is understood to be over 1, so the reciprocal will be 1 over the square root of 3. I need to rationalize that, so I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And when I do that, I end up with the square root of 3 over just the number 3. So now so that was 35. Now I'm going to do 36. I'm going to copy 36 down here. So 36 is t is equal to negative 7 pi over 4. Again, don't like that because it's negative, so I'm going to take 7 pi over 4, add 2 pi, and when I do that, I end up with pi over 4. Remember, these two have the same ordered pair, so I could go negative 7 pi over 4 to end up at pi over 4, or I could just go the pi over 4. Either way, my ordered pair is still going to be the square root of 2 over 2. So my sine of a negative 7 pi over 4 is going to be a positive square root of 2 over 2. My cosine of negative 7 pi over 4 is going to be a positive square root of 2 over 2. My tangent of negative 7 pi over 4 is going to be my y value, which is the square root of 2 over 2, over my x value, which is the square root of 2 over 2. So I'm dividing the same thing by the same thing, so that's simply going to be 1. I can multiply by the reciprocal too, but really don't have to. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So the cosecant of negative 7 pi over 4, I'm going to take this and I'm going to flip it, so it's 2 over the square root of 2. Don't like the fact that I have that radical in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. I end up with 2 times the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. And then the 2's will simplify, so my final answer is just going to be the square root of 2. To find the reciprocal of cosine, I'm going to do the secant of negative 7 pi over 4, which means I'm going to flip this 2 over the square root of 2, which is going to be the exact same work as what I just did up here. So this is just going to end up being the square root of 2. And then finally, the cotangent of negative 7 pi over 4 is going to be reciprocal of 1. So I take 1 and flip 1 and end up with 1. So those are the 6 trig functions. So the next one, it says 37 for 44 says evaluate the trig function using period as its aid. In other words, they're asking you to do what I've been telling you to do this entire time, is make that angle between 0 and 2 pi. So I have 5 pi over, I have the sine of 5 pi, which means 5 pi is larger than 2 pi, which means I did a couple laps around the unit circle. So I'm going to take 5 pi and find a coterminal angle. it's larger than 2 pi. So to find a coterminal angle that's going to put it on the unit circle, I'm going to want to subtract 2 pi. So I'm going to subtract 2 pi, and when I do that, I end up with 3 pi. Well, that's great and everything, but that's still larger than 2 pi. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2 pi again, and when I do that, I end up with pi. So what that means is 5 pi, if I drew that angle, here's my initial side, that's 2 pi, that's 4 pi, and here's 5 pi. So I'm going to end up right here. It's just I took 2 laps around the unit circle to do that. This is just asking me for the sign, so I'm looking at this ordered pair here. The sign is the y value, so I want 0 as my answer. So to officially write my answer, I'm going to take the sign of 5 pi, and that answer is just going to be 0. And they only want me to find the one trig function, so that's all I'm going to find. So next one is cosine of 7 pi. So again, 7 pi is larger than 2 pi, so I'm going to start by taking 7 pi and subtracting 2 pi. And when I do that, I end up with 5 pi. Again, larger than 2 pi, so I'm going to take 5 pi and subtract 2 pi again. Get 3 pi. Still larger than 2 pi, so I'm going to take 3 pi and subtract 2 pi, and I end up with pi. So here I'm going to end up at the same point, but this time for cosine of 7 pi, this is 2, 4, 6, and then 7. So this guy went around 3 times before it got to its stopping point. So to find the cosine of 7 pi, I'm looking at the x value, which would be -1. These are still the same set, so I am going to use period as an 8. So I have 8 pi over 3. That's still larger than 2 pi. So I'm going to find the coterminal angle. So I'm going to take 8 pi over 3 and subtract 2 pi. And when I do that, I end up with 6 pi over... No, I don't. My bad. I end up with 2 pi over 3. And again, if you're not good with fractions, you're taking 8/3 minus 2 on your calculator. Your calculator will give you 2/3. You just have to remember to put the pi back in there. So the cosine of 8/3 is going to have the same endpoint or the same terminal side as 2 pi over 3. So it's going to have this ordered pair here. So that's going to be the ordered pair that I'm using. So it just wants the cosine. So the cosine of 8 pi over 3 is going to be that x value, which is a -1/2. Okay, the next one is sine of 9 pi over 4. Again, larger than 2 pi. So I'm going to take 9 pi over 4, subtract 2 pi. And when I do that, I end up with pi over 4. So that's going to be the angle in the first quadrant, which means I'm going to be looking, whoopsie. I'm going to be looking at this ordered pair here. So I'm going to slide that out, get that out of the way. And so I'm going to say the sine of 9 pi over 4 is the y value, which is going to be the square root of 2 over 2. So those aren't difficult. I mean, they're kind of nice because you only have to find one instead of all 6. You just have to remember to add or subtract 2 pi. So 41 and 42 are the same directions, except for now they're negative angles. So they're negative angles, so I'm still going to want to add 2 pi. And I'm going to keep on adding 2 pi until I have that angle between a positive 0 and 2 pi. So here I have -13 pi over 6. I'm going to add 2 pi. When I do that, I get negative pi over 6. So I know that it's in the fourth quadrant, but let's just take negative pi over 6 and add 2 pi, and I get 11 pi over 6. This step isn't really necessary, but I like to be consistent, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have this angle that's a positive angle between 0 and 2 pi. So this cosine of -13 pi over 2, or -13 pi over 6, what that is I'm going around once, and I'm going around again to there. And so I end up with this side right here. There's my angle. So now I'm going to find the cosine of a -13 pi over 6. So I'm looking on my unit circle, and my ordered pair is going to be a positive 1/2. Okay, now I'm doing the sine of -19 pi over 6. So sine of -19 pi over 6, I'm going to add 2 pi. negative 19 pi over 6. I'm going to add 2 pi, which will be a negative 7 pi over 6. So I'm going to take negative 7 pi over 6, add 2 pi, and get a positive 5 pi over 6. So now that's between 0 and 2 pi. That's going to be this angle, this side right here, same coterminal side. And that's going to be the sine of negative 19 pi over 6. And that answer is going to be a positive 1/2. Okay, 45 through 50 is using your even and odd function. So sine, the first one, sine is an odd function. So what that means is if I have an angle here, this angle here, and so if this were, let's do 30 degrees, that's the easiest one to do. Square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. And then if I look at negative 30 degrees, that repairs the square root of 3 over 2, negative 1/2. So this one's talking about the sine. So I like doing that every single time I do sine or cos are even and odd, because that way I can see for sine I'm looking at 1/2 and I see that it changed signs. It's still the same number, but it changed signs. That's telling me that's an odd function. So what that means is that if the sine of t is equal to 1/3, so if I do some angle, I don't know what angle I'm drawing, I don't care what cosine is, the sine is going to be 1/3. Then when I go down here to negative theta, I don't care what the cosine is, it's going to be the same thing as that, but now my sine is going to be a negative 1/3 because it's going to change signs. So the sine of negative t, I don't know why it's doing this, is equal to negative 1/3. It's still going to have the same number, but it's going to change signs. So now the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to do the cosecant of negative t. So to do the cosecant of negative t, that's negative t, I'm just going to go up here to the sine of negative t and take the reciprocal, so that would be negative 3. So now let's do the cosine. This is really messy, and I'm sorry, but so to do the cosine, remember the cosine is this value, so a positive 30 is square root of 3 over 2, and negative 30 is the square root of 3 over 2. So it's the same number, same sign. So when I take the cosine of t, that's negative 3/4, which means the cosine of the opposite of t is still going to stay a negative 3/4. And then the next one, they want me to find the secant of negative t, which is the reciprocal of the cosine of negative t. So I'm just going to take this and flip it. I'm going to have a negative 4/3. So those ones, when they give you some random value like that, they're asking you to apply the even and odd properties, even and odd function properties. The next one says use your calculator to evaluate the trig expression, round your answers to the 4 decimal places. So I'm going to pick up my calculator. I'm doing the sine of 11 pi over 9. So on my calculator, I'm pressing the trig button. Sine is usually highlighted. I'm using my favorite button, Control Divide, and I'm going to do 11 pi over 9. So I'm going to put 9 here. And when I do that, I'm going to get that decimal of negative 0.6427. The next one asks me to find the secant of 1.8. When you take your next quiz or test, you're going to have to make sure that your calculator, you uncheck all the boxes, else when you press the trig, you're going to be really sad because these are going to be grayed out. So you want to make sure that you put it in, press the test correctly and hit Control A so that you have access to that secant button. So I'm going to do the secant. I think it was 1.8. I got lost on a tangent there. Yes, secant of 1.8. 1.8. Put that in my calculator, hit enter, and I get a negative 4.40. And that is it for the work. If you have any questions, let us know in class, and we will see you next time.